That last,
Yeah. Right. That's the issue. I suspect you could do some of it by phone or using virtual. Yeah.
I think it is, yeah. Never used it for something, to be honest with you.
did you see my email to you,
I don't know the answer to that. Can you read? So
I did
FOF1
this.
is brightness.
I gave you the, hold on,
Bright backlighting.
I gave you the double exclamation point.
Okay, we ready?
Yes.
Is that right?
Good evening. It is 6 o'clock on Thursday, March the 10th, and we are here for a public hearing concerning the beach-related issues that we've been talking about, it seems like, for a long time. And the items we're going to discuss tonight are 6 different items that were discussed during a virtual workshop that was hosted by Anne Marie. I want to thank her again for that January 18th virtual meeting that was hosted, where I think went on for nearly 3 hours with lots of questions and answers. And tonight we want to try to hear more if there are other additional points that want to be heard. And so the meeting tonight will review the comments that have come in on the 6 topics, and then we will ask for public comments. And we'd ask the comments, please limit your comments to no more than 3 minutes, if at all possible, just like we did at the Monday night public hearing. And we'll provide a 2-minute warning, as we did again on Monday night. We also will accept written comments between now and tomorrow afternoon at 4 p.m. And please send those comments to Janelle. She is in compiling them. We want to make sure that we've heard comments from everybody who wishes to make them. This will be up for council's consideration on Monday 14th, which is next Monday, at our regular monthly meeting. So with that, we would move then on to a public hearing on discussion of the first item, which is in order to resolve the inconsistencies and determine whether or not all parking zones should be identified in the city code. What Anne Marie turned up is that and GMB is that not all of the no parking zones are identified in the city code, and it seems as though that is a discussion that we want to have here a little regarding making sure that, and one of the things that was most glaring, I guess, is that Bay Avenue was not identified in the city code as no parking.
Right. So what we're looking to do is to eliminate the inconsistencies between sign placement, sign language, the code, and the areas that on the Bay Avenue revitalization plan were identified as no parking. And in order to do that, we need to know, should all of the no parking areas be designated in the code? So that's the clear kind of background of why that's.
So we're going to take these topics one at a time. If there's anyone who would like to specifically comment on the no parking issue, Dennis, please come forward. If you'd like to speak, please come to the microphone as Dennis is doing. Identify yourself by name and address so we make sure that we have it for the record. Thank you. Dennis?
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Dennis Reardon, 1302 Bay Avenue. On the first bullet, the no parking zones, I think that probably most of the people are not aware of the fact that in the city code under section 18339, all the no parking areas in the city are individually listed. After Bay Avenue was done and some of the streets were made no parking afterwards, they just haven't been put into the code. So I would simply say that all the no parking areas within the city that are not in the code should be put into the code.
Great. Thank you.
And if you want, I'll comment on number 2 as well.
Well, let's wait till we get
That's
to the,
it.
let's get all,
You do.
let's do this
Okay.
one at a time if we could, Dennis. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else who would like to speak in reference to this first item on the agenda?
Okay, we're getting
Get a hold
things
on
in the
from it.
Zoom saying that the sound is poor.
Yeah, I'm getting all kinds of messages.
So one of the things that we found when we had a Board of Adjustment meeting in here, and I don't know what it is about this room, is that the Zoom did not work well, but the YouTube did. So if you go to watch the video through YouTube and listen that way, that might be better. So if, I know that several people have texted some of us here, and if you can go to YouTube and listen and see if it sounds any better, we would welcome a text to let us know.
Okay. Okay, is there anything in the chat that any comments on the first item in the chat, other than the fact that we can't, people can't
Just
hear
about
us?
the audio.
Okay, great.
The other thing, Janelle, can you show Julian, unless he already knows, how to turn on the subtitles in Zoom so that, do you remember we did that with the Board of Adjustment? So. Oh, there you go. Oh, he's
Yeah.
already got it.
Got it? Okay. Great. All right. If there's no further comment and there's no comment in the chat regarding that, then I think we can move on to the second item on the agenda, which is the Bay Avenue signage plan identified emergency access streets where parking restrictions would ensure that the turning radii are sufficient for emergency vehicles. Staff recommends that these emergency access streets and associated requirements be codified. I think when we did Bay Avenue, and I'm the only member of council who was here, and I chaired the redo of Bay Avenue, we went to great pains to identify 6 streets as emergency access. And I think that it's important that they be identified. And they have signage, but they're not presently in the code.
Well, and Sherry, do you want to also share what we've determined in looking at what's in what's on signage out there now and what's on the plan? Because, again, it's evolved over time, so it's not entirely consistent.
Yes, so I'll just introduce myself, Sherry Hostedler, Senior Designer at GMB. And in speaking with Anne Marie just earlier today, so the Bay Avenue signage plans identify 6 streets, as you mentioned: Iowa, Indiana, New Jersey, Rhode Island, East Canal, and Massachusetts Avenue. However, East Canal currently has no emergency access signage out there now. Market Street does have emergency access signage, but it's not called out on the Bay Avenue signage plans. And Michigan has emergency access signage, but is not shown on the plans.
Okay. Thank you. So correcting the inconsistencies and identifying would be what this goal would be.
Correct.
Correct. Is there anyone who would like to comment on that? Dennis, I know you wanted to comment, and we'll get to you in just a minute. Come on up, Dennis.
Again, Dennis Verdon, 1302 Bay Avenue.
Dennis, we can't hear you. Pull the
I'm
mic-
sorry.
Pull the
Okay.
mic closer.
Again,
to you.
Dennis Verdon, 1302 Bay Avenue. Again, this is an issue that, the same thing we go into 18339. And again, I'll just comment that all of these streets that are not in the code should be put into the code. As to the language, I think it just takes somebody to look at all of the language and say the same thing one way instead of 3 or 4 different ways to make it consistent, just as you said. The other thing I wanted to say is that both 1 and 2 could easily have been on a mayor and council agenda in the first instance, as opposed to this public hearing agenda. Mayor and council can make this type of initial decision to codify at a regularly scheduled meeting. Not every decision on a public meeting agenda of mayor and council requires an additional public meeting. I think we could have eliminated some of this by putting it on your agenda. Thank
Well,
you.
are we
Thank you,
hurting anything by having this meeting?
Pardon?
What are we hurting by having a public meeting?
Well, you're not hurting anything, but at your meeting, which is a public meeting, the public can weigh in on the agenda item there. To me, and we have done in the past, when this type of thing comes up, if council feels that it's something they want to go forward with, they would schedule a public meeting. If council felt that it wasn't necessary, then it would be moot and you wouldn't have to go forward. It's not hurting anything, it's extra.
I beg your pardon? It's not hurting anything but what?
But it's just doing it an extra step that's not necessary.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Stephanie?
So Stephanie DeSantis, 1 Drake Knoll. A couple of things. Thank you for having the
Can you
public-
pull the mic up?
Yeah, thank you for having the public hearing. I think, especially in this time of you not doing meetings in person, I think it's important to have more rather than less so that the public has an opportunity to address these issues. I also would please ask that you to consider going back to 7 o'clock start times for meetings for people who commute from another town to come back home. Getting here by a 6 o'clock meeting allowed me about 10 minutes with a dog who'd been in a crate all day. So, and for other people who are on council who aren't here, who have children, I can imagine these earlier start times are difficult. I would ask you guys if you are going to designate the emergency access streets as part of the code, and I really have no problem with that. I do think that there should be the 6 streets that are designated that were part of the original plan. These streets that got added later, which weren't, from my estimation, from safety reasons as opposed to friends and favors for different people on council. I think if you look at the original 6, they were spaced out. It's certainly 6 streets is enough emergency access, certainly more than the rest of the town has. And so I would ask you to at least do the original 6 or pick 6 streets to do it. But I think overdoing it with the number that you have has done nothing more than protect people's consideration that they have private land on the beach and don't want the public parking on their streets. So I would ask you to try and do that.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie.
And it's nice to see you all in person again.
Yeah.
And I neglected to mention at the beginning of the meeting that Andrew is not with us this evening. However, he may be watching.
He is.
He's watching
And I
remotely.
believe he is, but if he isn't, this meeting is being recorded, so he'll have access to it. So we are all here, in spite of Andrew's not physically being here. So is there anyone else who would like to
There's some
comment?
stuff in the Q&A.
Is there a couple
so-
things there, okay? Julian, do you want to?
Oh, okay.
Yeah, it is all audio.
Is
More
it
audio
any
stuff.
better?
No, everyone still can't hear. I put the YouTube link in the comments.
Okay,
Are they still having a hard time?
okay.
So,
I wonder what the problem is.
Andrew, if you're
Yeah,
out there
I've
and
heard.
able to hear us, let us know,
Right.
or anybody can, let us know what you're hearing on the YouTube channel.
Kenny said YouTube is working fine.
Okay,
Kenny just said that?
okay.
It sounds better, he said on YouTube.
Okay, great.
And I will report that Andrew said that Dennis was speaking Mandarin when,
Right.
earlier.
Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to comment on the emergency access streets? And Julian, there are no comments in the chat? Okay. Then moving on to the third item on the agenda is there's often been confusion and conflict surrounding parking on paper streets and former paper streets off Cedar Avenue. Determine whether these areas should be open for parking or signed as no parking. And I would, again, welcome public comment. Please come forward. How are you tonight? Good evening, Mayor. Good
Hey,
evening.
Cap.
I hope that's positioned correctly.
I think
If
so.
not, we'll let you know.
Well, that's
Or the
clear.
audience will let you
That's
know.
clear. Everyone will, right. Mayor Becker, Deputy Mayor Williams, wherever you are, and members of the City Council, my name is Kevin McGinnis. I live at 1108 Bay Avenue, and my wife Kath and I are residents of the city. Thank you for providing this opportunity to offer some comments. And I have 3 points I would like to make. 2 of them are sort of universal, but since I'm standing here and I don't want to keep walking up and down, I hope I will be able to combine them in all 3.
Okay.
Members of the Lewis Beach Civic Association took very seriously the city's request about the importance of the January 18th city event on beach parking. We listened intently to the 3-hour presentation, and congratulations to the staff for weathering that. And collectively, I think we spent hundreds of hours preparing and submitting comments, questions, and recommendations on this issue. These covered specifics about recommendations, the impact of what was being considered on individual homes and streets, landscaping, trees, you name it, as well as general policy. That night, assurances were made that our comments would be reviewed and would be made available to the public. In the city manager's report dated February 14th, it states, the number and detail of comments we received was too much to be able to meaningfully review the feedback and develop a viable permit system reflective of the feedback for the 2022 summer season. Fair enough. There were a lot of comments. But I hope the promises and assurances made to those who contributed about reviewing and what was submitted and making those public will be kept at some point.
Can I just respond to that? It absolutely will.
Good.
The information that we have up there now was kind of the questionnaire tabulation. That's on the website now. But we literally received hundreds of questions. Many of those were multiple pages. So we literally have, somewhere between 600 and 1,000 pages of detailed comments that we are working to try to figure out how to organize in a way that is meaningful to the public and to the decision makers. It's extremely difficult to do that quickly. So we want to make sure we do it right. So we've focused for this season, this upcoming season, on the report that you have before you that is the subject of tonight's hearing, with the more detailed issues to come once we've been able to address those comments.
And some of those comments did reflect on some of the points that were here tonight, and I just hope there's some way of making sure those voices were heard, given the amount of time that was put into the submissions.
And we did. I mean, we reviewed comments as they came in, and I mean, I'm looking at Sherry from GMB. We made a lot of changes to things based on the comments, but a lot of the very detailed comments, to be able to organize them, really present them in a meaningful way, is going to take many, many hours. So we will do that once we are through this process. So I just
Again,
wanted to explain. I understand because.
I appreciate it. It was a voluminous task. I thought I sent you a note to that very
You
point.
did.
I appreciate it. All I'm saying is some of those comments are reflected in some of what's on the table tonight.
Right.
And I hope there's a way of acknowledging what people have already commented on in case they can't be here this evening. That's all
Okay.
I was trying to say.
No, that's fair. I just wanted to make sure that you know that we're not just putting
Well,
it on the
that's
back
good to hear.
burner.
That's good to hear. I'd like to offer 3 points if I could. First, when the city begins drafting new ordinances for the beach, please take into account that the reality that Lewis Beach is not a homogeneous neighborhood that was built consistent with a master plan. We are the polar opposite of a master plan. And you know what? We see that as part of the charm. Over the decades, we've evolved. As Dennis will tell you, back in the 30s, and he has pictures to prove it, Cedar Street ended just past Kentucky Avenue. Almost every street is different in design, orientation, and what have you. There's not even uniformity regarding where the streets are placed between homes. I think Bay Avenue is actually on a couple of people's property.
Right. We found that when we were doing
Yes,
Bay Aven.
I know. I still remember your conversation with Phil. And there's been little consistency in the city's enforcement of the code over the years. Consequently, we ask that when you draft the new ordinances, you make sure you address the inescapable reality that you're not imposing rules on a fixed grid. It's just not the same. You have to account for the flexibility. Second, sign pollution. Lewis Beach already suffers from sign pollution. On New Jersey Avenue, which is right next to me, there are 5 homes. During the season, there are 12 city signs on that street. This evening, the staff appears to be proposing or considering additional possibility programs that could result in additional signage. I hope the members of council will recognize, as you consider these, that at some point, city signs should not outnumber homes and residents.
I think we could all agree on that. It's not, sign pollution's not limited to the beach. It's not at all unique.
I know, but we're talking
get
about,
your point.
we're talking about the beach, and you've
Yeah.
admonished me repeatedly to stay on topic. I would like to address, as a third point, paper streets. 186 members of the Lewis Beach Civic Association have signed on to a petition that we are submitting for the record that reads as follows. On behalf of the following members of LBCA, all of whom are voting residents or property owners on Lewis Beach, we wish to voice our strong opposition to eliminating open space along Cedar Street on Lewis Beach. In 2013, the then City Council first raised the issue of turning beach paper streets into city parking. Due to overwhelming opposition from the community, the issue was dropped. In 2017, the City Council appointed a special Streets Review Committee, which, among other things, recommended rezoning 11 paper streets on the beach as open space. The city unanimously adopted this recommendation, citing, among other things, the significant impact this change would have on environmental protection and the area's community rating system. City officials went the extra step of promising that newly created open space would not be used for parking or construction. In 2018, the first Beach Parking Committee did not address this issue, and in 2021, the second Beach Parking Committee specifically recommended that open space on the beach not be turned into parking. We asked the city to preserve the zoning designation of open space given to our former paper streets, honor the promises made to residents and property owners, and protect against increased flooding by not turning open space into parking lots. We also believe that there is no need for additional signage for these previously designated areas for all of the reasons I just said. Thank you for this opportunity, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask a question? And I'm asking this mainly as a practical matter, because right now there's no signage. They're not designated as no parking. And often people do park there, and it creates conflict between residents and visitors. So are you suggesting we keep it, and Dennis, you can, what you've said is you can't ticket people for parking there if there's no signage?
Correct, I cannot take it.
So I'm trying to get a sense of status quo, that it's not improved for parking, but it's not prohibited. In order to prohibit it, we need a sign.
Well-
Do you have a sense of where you are? It's kind of a continuum.
It is very much a continuum because there are multiple other issues associated with that.
Right.
Based upon the things you guys have proposed. So, for example, I mean, these are things that went into the broader submission, and it's a little hard to pluck one issue out without addressing all of them. For example, as we have talked about, parking on Lewis Beach is not a problem in May, except for one weekend. It's certainly not a problem in September. As a matter of fact, the only car that we see on Bay Avenue in September is Dennis. We're periodically riding along. And so, yet, for other reasons, what you all proposed was a parking permit plan or a consideration permit plan that would apply for 5 months when it's not really needed. We have, I mean, you can have this in an endless argument, but we have 15 to 17 days a season where it's a problem. And I would like to, before we add hundreds of more signs, I would like to make sure that all of the issues are addressed so that we can avoid having any more signs on Lewis Beach.
Okay, that's fair. I honestly just was trying to figure out how to wrap all that in. So I understand what you're saying.
I understand, but I think, for example, on New Jersey, if you wanted to do everything and perfectly delineate everything according to plan, you'd probably be in the 40s on signage. I don't think anyone wants to get there.
Right, right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Would anyone else care to
Thank
speak?
you.
Yes, Stephanie?
Thank you.
No problem. That's what we're here for.
As many of you know, I am a beach bum, and it's why I live here.
Can you speak, Kayla just asked me to ask everybody to speak loudly and clearly, because it's not, the Zoom is not transcribing, and we're still not able to get the audio. But again, if you are listening and can hear bits and pieces, go to the agenda page and look at the video through YouTube. Sorry, Stephanie.
That's all right. Stephanie DeSantis, 1 Drake Knoll. I am a regular beach goer, and so I don't feel strongly one way or another about parking or not parking on the paper streets, except that I feel really strongly that the public should be allowed to park on those areas if the city starts taking away as many parking spaces as was said at the very tail end of the last public hearing, where the number was anywhere from 75 to over 100 spaces of places that people regularly park that are now going to be gone. And if the city intends to put striations or whatever designation to limit parking that people have done for decades in various areas of the beach, and it amounts to close to 100 people or 100 spaces, then I think in fairness, then you have to look at these paper streets. I'm fine with you keeping no parking on the paper streets if you're not eliminating other avenues of generally parked upon places. But I talked to a resident here who is a seasonal resident, but the family has owned the house for years, and at least under that parking plan, at least 2 spaces that have been regularly used for decades are eliminated for what somebody now considers to be a safety issue. And so I ask, this is a whole package, you have to look at it all. I feel very strongly that all of us own that land on the beach and should continue to have access to it, and I would hate to see you do anything to limit my access to the beach that I love.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie. Anyone else care to speak about parking on paper streets? Yes, Linda.
Linda Rathmanner, 300 Seagull Drive. I was a member of the 2018 and 2020 Beach Committee. Regarding the paper streets, we park on a paper street across from the Children's Beach House. It's more like a parking lot. It's wide, it has stone on it, and I'm assuming that was done that way when they were redoing Cedar. I believe they had a lot of the equipment parked there. We are on the beach a lot in the summertime, and since the 2018 Beach Parking Committee, I've been very aware of what goes on the paper streets. And basically, either going to the beach or coming home, we very rarely see a lot of people using the parking. We do see a lot of boats being stored by residents who live on either side of the paper street. There are rentals on either side of some of these paper streets, and they have their overflow visitors parked there. There's boats from them. In fact, the one house next to where we park is an enormous white house, and there was a huge boat there and several trucks parked in the paper street. So I guess my problem is, if you put no parking signs, how does this affect the residents who actually use the paper streets for overflow parking and storage and whatnot? So I think that needs to be a consideration. As far as I'm concerned, I think the status quo is just fine. A lot of the residents do self-police. They will park their cars at the entrance to the paper streets. So that's just my observation, so you may want to take that into consideration also.
Thank you very much, Linda.
Thank you, Linda.
Okay, does anyone else care to speak Is there anyone else who would care to speak about the parking issue? Yes. Cole, thank you.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Cole Flickinger, 903 Cedar, formerly 903 Cedar and Leipzig Avenue. So Leipzig Avenue was a paper street, and I think the point that my wife and I, Tanya, are making is it is not a paper street anymore, and Leipzig Avenue no longer exists. If you look at the Sussex County parcel search map, you know, it shows Connecticut, it shows Cedar. It does not show Leipzig anymore, so I'm not sure why we're talking about streets that don't exist anymore. You know, we were involved back in 2017 and 2018 when it was a street. We built our house in 16 and 17, and when we bought the lot, we actually had two frontages. So we had a 25-foot setback on Leipzig, we had a 25-foot setback on Cedar. We designed and built our house accordingly. When Mayor and Council and the Planning Commission came forward and made this proposal that we're going to eliminate and extinguish the paper streets, our deed and our frontage was revised such that we only have one frontage now, which is Cedar Street. We have a 25-foot setback on one frontage only. So I think the point I'm making is we're talking about using a paper street that supposedly exists and maybe putting parking on it or enforcing parking on it. But in fact, the point I'm making is it doesn't exist. If you look at the Lewis zoning map right now, it is open space. It's no longer a street. So we obviously are not in support of parking on open space.
Right.
And we're curious, is the city going to propose or make a motion to take what is currently open space and recreate a street or a parking lot?
I don't believe that's the intent.
Okay.
I think that there are still paper streets that are not paved, and that was the consideration that was being, but those that were eliminated, as you described, would not be part of this.
So we're not talking about any of the paper streets that were,
Sure thing.
Let me clarify. When council abandoned the paper streets
Right.
back in 2018.
and that's Smyrna, Dover, Harrington, Hartley, Georgetown, Leipzig, Newcastle, Seaford, St. George's, Viola, and Wilmington.
Yes. When that happened, and when it was rezoned to open space, the statement made at that point in time was that it would not be improved for parking, but that there was no change to the status quo. So the fact that parking was happening there was not going to be prohibited. That was the statement made by council at the time that they were abandoned before. So the issue isn't whether they will be improved, it's whether it stays status quo or becomes actively no parking. Does that make sense?
My point is we're talking about paper streets, and I want to be clear, these streets don't exist.
They don't exist
Right,
anymore.
but they're still open space, and at this point, people are allowed to park there, even though they're not improved for parking.
So I think the conversation is, are we going to allow people to park on open space, or are we going to allow people to, right? Because that could be anything in the marsh,
Exactly.
right?
I mean, that.
So there's no dividing line behind our house or next to our house. It's all open space.
Exactly. Okay. All right, thank you.
So, and I think I would encourage people to go back and look at May 22nd of 2018, that public hearing, the June 11th of 2018 meeting, when this motion was put forward. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Stephanie, do you want to comment further? Let's see if there's anybody else who wishes to comment. We'll get you back up. Yes, ma'am.
Kelly Myers from 306 Ocean View Boulevard. I do park on the North Washington Paper Street around the Children's Beach House. I just wanted to comment, I think, kind of combining comments from several people, and I think it should be status quo. I don't think we need sign pollution out there. I think I'll be perfectly honest and visitors coming in there aren't parking on the paper streets. I think a lot of residents are using them for overflow from rentals. Residents are using them, the butt ends are using them for their own vehicles, flower pots, whatever. I don't think it's people coming, it's not people coming in visiting, it's not people looking for parking spaces, it's people, it's locals using them and letting the other people park in the spaces along the street. I don't think it's a big deal. I don't think it's creating a big issue. I think just leave it alone.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so, sir, how do you come forward?
Yeah, good evening. My name is Mike Savage, and I'm at 1903 Cedar Street, which is adjacent to what used to be Dover Street. And once that changed, we did park there. Our neighbor parked there, but once it became open space, we have not parked there. So no one is parking there. And it just doesn't make any sense to me, once they changed it to open space, that now is going to become a parking lot. That's ludicrous to me. So, okay?
Thank you. Okay. Stephanie, is there anyone else who wanted to speak? Dennis, okay, let's get Stephanie up here first.
And we do have a comment in the chat as well.
Let's get Stephanie up here first, Dennis. Okay, well, we'll get you up here, okay?
I just wanted to respond that, yes, you do allow some parking in open space, and you do it pretty much every Saturday during the farmers market season, that there are the vehicles connected with the farmers who park in our open space park. Really what you're talking about is maybe 17 days of the year when the beach is really crowded, allowing parking on open space that hasn't been a problem for decades. So I would just ask you to take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Stephanie. Dennis?
Darn, Dennis Reardon, 1302 Bay Avenue. I don't think I've said this much when I was on council.
Here's your chance.
But as to the parking on the former paper streets that are now open space, and there were 11 of them, as Cole read off, that were designated open space, I feel that they should stay status quo. People park there, they park there. They don't, they don't. There's no reason to put more signs up there. There's not an issue with it. If I'm not mistaken, there are no parking signs anywhere else in the city on open space, for instance, along Pilottown Road.
Yeah.
So I don't see any need to expand, to start with the beach. I think we've had enough issues with that. And I'd like to say that I'd like to see the issue of raising that question put to rest so that we don't have it again. We've had it, as Kevin has said and Cole has said, we've had it 4 or 5 times, going back to 2013 when Jim Ford raised the question and we darn near had a revolution in City Hall. I remember that very well. Ted, you and I were sitting there.
I remember it very well.
And, also keep in mind that Lewis Beach is a residential area. I think as the GMB gang found out, there were about 550 potential parking places. Why would we want to put more parking in a residential area of the city? We don't put it anywhere else in the city. There are parking issues throughout the city. Lewis is a gem. It brings a lot of renters, people that live there, the renters, the visitors, all come to the beach. And that's it drives an economic engine as well. And to turn the open space areas into public parking, designated public parking, is going to change the character of Lewis Beach. I don't want to see that happen.
Okay.
There are other ways to address this parking issue. So let's keep Lewis like it is, the wonderful place that it is. All right, and just leave it status quo.
Okay, thanks, Dennis.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Anyone else care to speak in reference to parking? Do we have anything in the chat?
Yes, we have from, oh goodness, here I go with my scrolling again. From Kagi and Wilson at 12 Iowa Avenue. Okay, one, council needs to understand Lewis Beach is a residential community first and foremost. Council needs to prioritize tax-paying citizens over visitors, though they are welcome to enjoy our beaches. Two, because we are a residential community, the goal should not be to maximize parking spots, but to designate parking spots that are safe and reasonable. Three, Lewis Beach has many quirky features such as streets of different sizes and homes without driveways. This makes us unique and appealing, but can create inconsistencies. Four, since a standard driveway generally accommodates 2 cars, you request that homes without driveways have 2 spots designated for resident parking, resident-only parking. So I don't think we actually proposed. One, I want to clarify that everything in the report that we presented, it was a list of decision points, not a list of recommendations. Right. It was really a listing of, these are areas where we got feedback that we believe that with direction from council, we can do something to address for the coming season. So I want to be clear that nothing that staff has put forward is a recommendation that paper streets or former paper streets be improved. But we did get comments through the public outreach that people did not want parking on the former paper streets. So it was a decision point. Is status quo okay, or did they want to go further? And I think that's the purpose of this being here tonight, to get feedback on these issues that, based on the prior feedback, we believe that we do have an opportunity to make some decisions before the coming season so that the whole parking situation can improve some rather than continue to become increasingly problematic. So I want to clarify that that's the purpose of what we put out, and that's the purpose of hearing from you all tonight. So.
Okay. Any other comments in the chat?
In the chat?
No, not in the
Okay,
chat.
great.
Was there anything, Kayla, you were looking on YouTube to see if there wasn't, okay.
Okay, great. Are there any other comments from the audience here this evening? All right, then I think we can move on to item 4, which is feedback from the workshop suggests that other no parking areas be striped on the streets off Cedar Street. Consider if marking should be added to the pavement of side streets. Would anyone care to comment on that?
And just again, to share the context of this, you'll recall that several years ago, the city painted yellow in that 30-foot area on, from each side street. And that has kind of clarified that those areas are not for parking, which has, I think, improved the visibility. We received some comments that we should do that type of marking on the side streets as well. We also received comments saying, don't mark the side streets, it will make them ugly. So again, this is where it's you are the people who live there, so that's the context of why this is in here.
Dennis, it looks like you're ready to make a comment.
Come on.
Just take a chair.
I don't know why you just didn't sit
Just
up
sit right
front,
there,
you know,
Dennis.
You see all those empty seats?
Yeah.
You see those empty seats, Dennis? There they are,
We
right
got
there.
the empty seats, you know.
Yeah. I was a little confused with this one, and thank you for that explanation, but where would you, if you would put yellow lines, where would you put them on the side of the street where there is a sign that says no parking? Or what exact, there is no pavement off of the
Right.
roadway, so where would,
It
where else
would
would
be
you
on the
talk-
pavement. I mean, again, this is not something that I necessarily thought was a great idea, but it is something that came up, so
Can we put this one to rest and not do it? I mean, it just
That's-
doesn't make sense
that'll
to
be a
me.
decision made on
That's why
Monday.
we're here getting feedback on it.
Where would you do it? I mean,
You would have to go
I'm
to
at
the
a
pavement.
loss.
Do you have any visual?
You'd have
I
to go
mean,
on the
is it-
pavement coming up to the stop sign.
Right.
There
so-
is no pavement. Oh, you mean coming up to the stop sign?
That was one of the things that was mentioned. Again, from an aesthetic, I think it,
Terrible.
right.
That's putting it mildly.
But
But
if,
again, well, if you're going to designate no parking in front of stop signs,
Right.
what would be the impetus behind that? Now, you know, you and I had this discussion the other day. The stop signs on those connector streets are probably 10 to 12 feet off the paved surface. You can't now stop at a stop sign and pull out on Cedar Street without taking your life in your own hands. You have to pull up to the paved surface. That's number one. You really need to look at the configuration all over these streets. As Kevin said, you know, I've got a map at home, a picture. It's a beautiful picture. I gave Carl a whole bunch of them. At 1930, and Cedar Street stopped right about Kentucky Avenue.
I've seen it.
Yeah, and I know that because the three brown dots right before that are Oregon Avenue, and I know all those homes were built before 1930. That's my landmark. So we have to really look at what we have on each corner, and if we're going to say, well, we have to enforce the law and do 30 feet, then I would suggest that if we're going to have to do that on the beach, we need to do it throughout the city. And we don't do that throughout the city. And we're a resort area, and it's not going to, all it's going to do is take away parking places. If you need to do 5 feet or something like that, fine, but 30 feet, you're going to defeat the purpose of providing parking places. And you're not going to be consistent with what's done in the rest of the city. And as I said to you, if you look at Bank Street, in front of the post office there, that stop sign's got a yellow marker that's maybe 10 feet. And there are other areas throughout the downtown where there's a stop sign and there is no marking. And there are a whole bunch of them that are much less than 30 feet. So if we're going to be doing that, we need to be doing it consistently throughout the city. So my vote is leave it like it is. People will find their way. And as we get to Dennis, with your crew, you guys got to get consistent in where you're going to give out tickets and for what reason. Every one of your guys has a different opinion as to what is a violation. They've got to be consistent.
So-
And I would encourage you to have that standard with your guys.
They all try to enforce the laws of the city and the state. We do allow some leeway on how close people can park to that stop sign.
So I'm not talking about stop signs.
Which ones are you talking about particularly?
Well, the street coming up to my house is Oregon Avenue, and it's interesting in that the map that the GMB guys did, they don't have any parking on the west side of Oregon Avenue because there's not 9 feet off of the paved surface. People have been parking there forever, no problem. When you get up close to the corner, I've had discussions with 2 of your staff, and both of them had different interpretations as to where you could park, and they gave out tickets. And I'm just asking that you be consistent. And these guys need some instruction on what is and what isn't.
I'll
They
make
do a
sure.
good job, and I'm not complaining about them. I just think that I've observed where consistency would be appreciated.
The primary goal, when they look at a situation like that, it all boils down to a decision they make on a safety issue. If the car is too far out on the street and they think it's going to impede the traffic or create a vision problem, they'll issue a citation for that.
And I don't have any problem with that. I mean, you look at Cedar Street, if that tire's over the white line, give them a ticket. I think they should. But I'm talking about on the connector streets.
Okay.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks, Dennis.
I guess that's it.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Stephanie? We do have chairs up front, since both of you are coming from the back of the room.
I get my exercise.
Yeah.
This may be one of the few issues that Dennis and I agree on, that, I think that I don't know how you do it fairly to paint the lines on those side streets when throughout town they're not. You look in the old section of town when people are parking for the farmer's market, it's a free-for-all in terms of people parking. They do it safely. To some extent, it's traffic calming, because when you pull out, you do go slower, you're looking around the corner. I mean, turning on Bay Avenue with the free-for-all of bikes can go either way, and pedestrians can go either way. It just causes you to be slower and take your time. And as Dennis said, people have been parking in some of these spaces for years with no safety issues, and I think it's time to stop talking about that issue and just leave it alone.
Great, thank you. Would anyone else care to comment in the room? Okay. Do we have anything in the chat, Anne Marie?
Did not see anything. Let me just double check. Just that it's very difficult to chat on YouTube. If you are on, or if you're watching on YouTube and you wish to make comments and you still have the Zoom open and have it, turned down, you can still submit your comments through the chat. So that's the only thing. Oh, hold on. Mary Jean Gilligan, we sent an email to members of City Council, the mayor, and city manager regarding off-street parking at our residence at 14 Kentucky Avenue. We have parked on the street for 39 years and have no driveway and would like to continue to park adjacent to our house. So I think that tees us up for the next issue.
Yeah, it is. Okay. Is that the only comment in the chat?
That was the only new one in the chat.
Okay. Yeah, we're familiar with that one. So the next issue is, the issue continues to arise about whether off-street parking spaces should be designated for residents with no off-street parking, recognizing that any redevelopment of lots off-street parking is required. Should the city provide reserved on-street parking for residents with no off-street parking? And we just had the comment from Mrs. Gilligan regarding this, and we are aware that there are some houses that were built early on that had no off-street parking before there was a city requirement. And some of these owners are experiencing difficulty during the season and perhaps other times locating a place in close to their home.
I will also add that one of the earlier comments from Mrs. Wilson, Ms. Wilson, Ellen Wilson, that was one of her key issues as well.
Great.
I think there's been 5 or 6 folks over the last few months who have contacted us who do not have off-street parking. And so this issue has been explored pretty well.
And one thing, I've had some conversations and people have said, well, why don't people put in a driveway? From the perspective of on-street parking, putting in a driveway access has the same effect of taking a parking space out of the inventory. So I do want to make that point clear, regardless of how you fall on it. If people who don't have a driveway were to add a driveway, that's up to 20 feet that now is not accessible for parking.
It should also be noted that we've already made some exceptions for people who are either elderly or handicapped to reserve a space in front of their home. So that consideration has already been dealt with by council, and we have a couple exceptions over on the beach, and we've had exceptions in downtown Lewis as well. Stephanie, did you want to comment further?
Yeah,
Please come up if you would.
And I think I put this in my comments on the last public hearing. The city council has been asked to, grant people special parking when they don't have parking. And I remember it specifically, it was probably one of my early times on city council when we made
Put the mic up a little bit, or talk into it as
when
well.
we made 1812 park into a metered lot, and there were some residences near there that didn't have any off-street parking, and they were asking for their special parking spot in 1812 parking lot. My original apartment address was on Second Street, and it had no off-street parking, and so I had to scrounge around myself for parking. And so there is a lot of precedence for not granting people special parking when they don't have parking of their own, and you let the economy bear that out, or people can make arrangements to rent space from their neighbors, or have good neighbors that will help them. There have been a few exceptions where we granted parking for somebody who was going through chemo treatment, and it wasn't her parking spot, it was designated handicap, so anybody who was handicapped could park there. But I don't think that the beach parking should be treated any different than how the residents within town have been treated in terms of having their own special place when they've had a property that doesn't have what they want. I don't think that should be the taxpayers or the city, giving up parking spaces for that situation.
Okay. Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
We do have a hand up
Okay.
in Zoom. Mary Jean Gilligan has a hand up, so I don't know if you want to, if you can unmute her, Joanne, and allow her to talk. Okay. So Mrs. Gilligan is still muted. So Mrs. Gilligan, if you do want to speak, you can unmute yourself. Sometimes people put their hands up accidentally.
Yeah.
Okay. That may be an accidental hand up.
Okay.
We have a comment.
Okay. Yes, please. Thank you.
I would like to echo Stephanie's comments, and on top of that, mention that especially...
Can you pull the mic closer? Sorry.
I'd like to echo...
Name and address again for the
Kelly
record.
Myers, 306 Ocean View. Echoing Stephanie, and add that especially on the Cedar Avenue side, there are much fewer days and times that residents are limited to not being able to park compared to somebody on the city side. You're limited to weekends and during the day at most, where somebody on the city side, where Stephanie was talking about, is all weekend long, many nights, evenings, when it's tourist season. So I would definitely be opposed to that.
Okay, thank you. Okay. I'm not sure. Anyone else care to comment in the room? Yes, Dennis. You really do need to take a seat up front.
If it wasn't for Stephanie and I, this meeting might already be over.
You notice?
As was alluded to earlier, a lot of these, there was no rhyme or reason, no planned community, and so many of these homes were built without parking spaces on the property.
Sure.
And given that consideration, I think that there should be applications made to City Hall, to council, on an individual basis, and explain the circumstances, and if you guys feel it's warranted, then I think it should be done. But I think it ought to be on a case-by-case basis, and you could, give the city manager the authority to deal with it, or council to deal with it. And I know the Gilligan situation, when they built their house, the mayor said,
Don't build.
don't put a garage in there, you can use the street. So they didn't, and now they don't have any place to park.
They've changed.
So, that's the type of consideration
Right,
that
right.
should come to you guys on an individual basis and
Yeah, you're right.
address them that way.
Okay, thank
All
you,
right, I'll be
Dennis.
back on the next one.
Okay, I figured you might.
Okay. So we do have two things in the Q&A in the chat.
Okay.
Leslie Newman said there is a safety issue, there is an issue of safety having the restriction of parking on Cedar supports safety, keeping folks off the corner. I support restrictions on the side streets, connecting streets, that will help vehicles make safe entry onto Cedar.
Okay.
And then, I thought there was another,
What was her name? Leslie what? Newman?
We can't hear you.
you shifted it to answer. I don't think, that one's not been answered yet.
No, but I just asked them to state their name, address.
Oh, okay. Oh, that's why it shifted, okay. So Linda Williams said, why have the spaces at the end of the state streets where it meets the beach not been considered for parking? It used to be in the 1960s, parking for up to 6 cars. Then the city let those areas be overgrown.
I think we're required to leave that alone.
Okay.
I think that's a DENREC requirement, isn't it?
I don't know, we can check with DENREC.
I think that is.
So I will follow up with DENREC and try to get back to council before Monday on that.
Okay.
Let me just check the chat again. Oh, Mary Jean Gilligan said we don't know how to talk when they raise their hand. So Joanne, can you unmute her again and just make sure she gets the message that click here to unmute? If the host asks you to unmute.
That's on YouTube.
Okay, so apparently the audio on YouTube is now getting wonky.
Oh, no. Is it really?
Anybody love technology?
Oh, yes.
Hopefully by speaking directly into the mic, we can make it a little better.
Hopefully we get it checked out before Monday.
Yeah, well, we're not in here on Monday.
Yeah, right, I know.
So, thankfully. So, we had one of our, what's called the encoder, it went down, and we are on a loaner right now. So I don't know, they spent a couple hours here on Friday and Monday, I guess. And we're on a loaner, and we're, supposed to be getting a new one, but we were a little, oh, I thought there was another. Okay, is that? Mrs. Gilligan, we can hear you now.
We can't hear you, but it's all coming through
It's
garbled.
unintelligible.
Yeah.
And that was, did you hear Ted's voice?
It's not me.
Said what the spaces at the end of the state streets where it meets the beach not been considered for parking. It used to be in the 1960s, parking for up to 6 cars.
Wait, that's repeating.
Okay.
That's a recording.
That's you. That's,
I know that voice.
all right.
Okay.
Yeah, that sounded familiar, didn't it?
Instant replay.
All right.
It's a replay.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay.
Okay.
So I will follow up with I got nothing. I don't even.
All right.
I don't just check the chat again. Does anybody here have the YouTube stream on their camera or on their? It might be coming off of your thing.
Oh, no.
It's not? Okay.
On YouTube.
All right.
Okay.
I think we have Mrs. Gilligan's point, but pretty well understood.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Okay.
Were there any other comments from the room?
It's an echo chamber.
It is an echo chamber.
We got everything tonight here.
All right.
Okay, so then, if there's no further comment on the designation of parking for residents who do not have parking, then I think we can move on then to the last item on the agenda, which is delineate and/or meter parking at Roosevelt Inlet. GMB provided a layout for how we might create some parking or delineate parking over at Roosevelt Inlet. We know that it's kind of helter-skelter right now, and people park on the perimeter, and then some of them try to park in the middle. I think the plan that was And do we have that plan?
Can you bring it up?
So.
Can we bring it up?
Janelle,
It's right here, I know.
Okay.
So then Julie will have it in like 30 seconds.
Okay, and there are boards on the side of the room. I had encouraged people to look at them as we were, in the downtime before the meeting. So that, one of the boards does show where
The one closest here
right.
does show the.
And so what we had put in the packet that was on the council agenda showed 35 spaces. After using some turning templates, they determined that in order to really be able to, because sometimes vehicles towing boats go up Cedar and turn around there, they had to remove 3 spaces. So every bit of feedback that we've received on the parking layout for Roosevelt Inlet was a preference for the angled parking. So that's what we've got on the board here and now on the screen.
And that provides 32 spaces, is that correct?
33.
33, okay.
And one of the things we actually talked about the other day as we were looking at this, it also does provide an area up to the right of the handicap spaces, so that they're on the top left of it. To the right of those, you would be able to have a small drop-off area, because we know that a lot of people will, drop people off at the beach, unload, and then they'd be able to then go park. So that would be a very short-term drop-off area. If we are delineating spaces, we need to include ADA accessible spaces. So we have 2 ADA accessible spaces. So the way it would work is that the lot would remain stone except for the 2 ADA spaces, and those ADA spaces would be paved, and then we'd have to have an accessible path of travel to get to the dune crossing. And the good news is that we do have Moby mats there now, so we have an accessible path of travel out to the beach as well.
Anne Marie, I just wanted to clarify, it is 32 spaces.
Oh, 32, I'm
On
sorry.
the plan. I think you were thinking 33 because of that loading and unloading area.
Okay. People to look at them as we were, in the downtime before the meeting. So that I've
one
got
of the
no
boards
idea.
does show where the
one closest here.
Right. Okay.
Does show them.
When you talk, get back from your mic.
Okay.
'Cause something's
Julian, maybe you
happening.
could mute the feedback.
Okay, so apparently it is better when people are not right up on the microphone.
Yeah, yeah.
We've heard that now. Sorry.
That's what I'm getting.
All right.
I
so-
love technology. Did I mention that?
Okay, Stephanie,
Come up to the
you gotta
mic,
come up
just
to the
because
mic
we
so
have a lot of
we try
people
to get a
watching.
recording of it anyway.
Just don't get on the mic.
Yeah, don't do what
'cause
we've been
that's
telling you to do
causing
all
problems.
night.
Yeah, right.
Is this proposed to be metered or not?
It's an option, it's not,
Right.
It's either or.
So it could be delineated and metered, or delineated and not metered, either way.
I'm fine with the status quo of having it not delineated and not metered, but if you do delineate it, I do hope you take into consideration that a lot of people of limited means, they go there, they fish there, they hang out there, they get solace from watching the sunset and whatnot. And I would hate to do anything to make it cost prohibitive or in line with what's at the public parking at Beach 1 and Beach 2. I think there's a lot of cultural history of people coming to that area to fish and hang out that is just not conducive with it being metered parking, and I think it will change the dynamics. So I don't support designating the spaces at all. If there's a couple of areas of safety concerns that you want to designate, that's fine, but I think this is a waste of money.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else care to speak on this? Dennis? You know, we've offered you a seat up front, how many times?
Oh, this is
I go back to, I think somebody made a comment about using the spaces at the end of the connector streets on the beach as parking areas. We addressed that in the last beach parking committee,
Dennis,
and...
back up from the mic
I'm
because
sorry.
I'm getting
Okay, is that better?
something from people.
I don't know.
Okay, stand right, just don't be right on it.
All right, you
Okay.
tell me if I need to get back closer or farther away.
You're good, you're good.
Okay, so we addressed that at the last beach parking committee, as Tim can attest, and we all said, no, that's not an area that we want to go in and tear down what's there and put parking in, and it would go back to the same thing as we would with the open space to make that parking. We don't want to turn Lewis Beach into a parking lot and spoil what we already
Yeah,
have.
right.
So I had to make that comment. Now, as to Roosevelt Inlet, the first beach parking committee recommended delineating the parking spaces at Roosevelt Inlet. And I think it's still a good idea. It would make it more orderly up there. I like the idea of putting the ADA spaces in there. As far as metering, I don't think that's where we want to go. I mean, Roosevelt Inlet has 2 porta potties. It's not like Savannah Beach. It's not like Johnny Walker Beach, where you have running water, you have facilities. And historically, this is an area where people used to go take their kids to go fishing. You're allowed to fish on the beach. You fish off the rocks in the inlet. And it's more family-oriented. I know there are more beachgoers now that Matt Carter's got his stuff there. But as far as putting parking meters in there, I think it's a bad idea.
Okay.
I would certainly recommend against it.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm not going to say anything else.
Okay.
Tonight.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Would anyone else care to comment? Yes.
My name's Chip Everson. I currently live at 512 Seagull Drive / 1006 Bay Avenue. And prior to Seagull Drive, I lived over at 9 C.H. Mason Way down by the yacht club. And so a couple of comments. I completely agree that we should delineate the spaces on Roosevelt Inlet. In the summertime, it's a free-for-all, and it's a safety issue to me because there are fender benders and bump ups all the time over there, and it's not safe for pedestrians and especially handicapped individuals. So I'm all for the ADA spaces up there and having them delineated, but I think metering is a bad idea because that, that just creates economic barriers for people, right? A couple of other comments, having lived on 9 C.H. Mason Way for about 20 years. With regard to paper streets, I think that's a bad idea for parking. However, people do need clarity. And so I think that should you decide not to allow or to continue not to allow parking in open space, then I think there needs to be some information available for the public that lets them know that. Because right now people are confused. I also think that each of these paper streets are very unique. I lived up by the one on Iowa Avenue. I know for a fact one of those neighbors has a deeded right-of-way to that paper street. Okay, so you can't have parking there. But people do park there. And so then you get into confrontation, right? And so as there's more pressure for parking on the beach, there is need for clarity. Okay, so I'm all for keeping quote unquote the status quo with regard to no parking on open space, but people need information on what they can and can't do on the beach. I'm not sure that means a sign, but I think personally one of the best things the city ever did on the beach was with regard to safety was the yellow striping on Cedar Avenue. That allowed everybody to actually be able to get in and out. And I do not want that striping on the side streets because, quite frankly, there'll be more striping than street. And there's just no way that's necessary. I really don't think. So anyway, those are my comments, and I just wanted to say that every one of those paper streets is a very unique situation. They need to be really And I should be calling them open space because that's what they are, but they are each unique with a unique set of neighbors, with a unique set of circumstances. And so I think we should not condone parking in those areas, but the public does need to be informed that they should stay away.
Great, thank you, Chip. Okay, anyone else in the room care to comment? Do we have anything in the chat?
No. Let me check Q&A. We got nothing.
Okay,
No hands up?
all right. One more time in the room, would anyone care to comment or make a second comment?
Not even
Is it-
Dennis?
All right.
Hearing anyone.
So, Mayor, just as it relates to the record, and this is on Monday's agenda, partially because some of these things, like if we do delineate parking at Roosevelt Inlet, some of these things will take time to do, and in order to get them done before the season starts, they will need to be acted upon. The technology challenges, of course, indicate that there are some people who had intended to watch from home and perhaps did not. So, given that, here's my thought, and you can tell me what you think. I can send an email blast out, because this is something that I think everybody in the city has expressed some degree of interest in, so it's definitely worthy of an email blast. I can send an email blast with a link to the YouTube stream, and then you can set a period of time for comments. And if you want to say, and I think initially, Mayor, we had talked about close of business tomorrow,
Right.
but if you want to make it, say, 5 o'clock on Saturday, if the comments come to me, I can put that, because I don't want you to have to work on the weekend. We can, if
You can upload it.
I can make sure that they get out to you.
I think acceptable.
Is that-
Given the technology issues we've had, I think that's
right.
an acceptable answer. So we will extend the comment period until 5 o'clock on Saturday, knowing that you're going to put out an email blast
Right,
tomorrow.
right. So, and then I would get comments to
I think
all of
that'll-
you on Sunday.
That's reasonable. Okay. Okay. If there's anything else, I would, again, just remind people, you're welcome to submit a written comment if there was something that you didn't have a chance to say, or if there are people listening who did not, for whatever reason, could not comment tonight. We would love to hear from you. Obviously, this is on the agenda, as Anne Marie indicated. Some of these things are time sensitive, only because if we're going to be ready for the beach season, we need to get started on them and begin to let contracts to get them done. Particularly the delineation of parking at Roosevelt Inlet
Right.
is something that
And-
needs to be
and I do-
very time sensitive.
And I do want to mention, I know, Dennis, you had mentioned that this had come up before. And the challenge we had before is because the coarseness of the stone makes it, you can't paint it. So what we're looking at is a delineation where we would use timbers put in that people would pull up to. I don't know that there's another way. Because painting will not work, we know that. Well, Rick, we looked at this before. Do you want to,
Who's that talking?
Dennis,
Dennis.
do you want to address that? Because your guys went out to figure out how to do it.
Yeah, I mean, painting up at the inlet it's just as good as painting in front of the yacht club sometimes. It just doesn't work. It just,
So it would require constant maintenance, and those lines would move.
yeah, as the stones move, the cars move, it's just going to make the lines all messed up.
So it would be more similar to how we have parking delineated at Canal Front Park.
I was going to say that's exactly the way parking is delineated, and I think there's a parking bumper at the end of each
Right.
parking space,
Right.
which helps to define it.
Yep.
And then if you're going to use some other timber mechanism, I think that's probably
Right.
better. And also, I think the helter-skelter reference to parking over there particularly in the middle, and this anticipates that there would be parking in the middle.
Right.
It gets very, very helter-skelter. And in addition to handicapped people, there are a lot of little kids that go out there. And as you dodge between cars, you put yourself in harm's way.
Well, and I think with Matt's shack